Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course Nutrition for the Family. This is the fourth module in which we are focusing on nutritional care for females during physiological stress. And this is the fourth lecture of this module in which we will be talking about physiology of lactation. I am Dr. Jaspreet Kaur, presently working as Associate Professor in Government College for Girls, Ludhiana, Punjab, affiliated to Punjab University, Chandigarh. And this project is funded by DTH Swayam Prabha, MHRD, New Delhi. During the previous lectures of this module, we had discussed about what are the various changes which occur during pregnancy, and later we discussed about the nutritional care and nutritional concerns during pregnancy. Now, in this lecture, we shall be studying about nutrition care during lactation. And in this particular lecture, we shall be focusing on physiology of lactation, and then we will see what are the factors affecting lactation process, and then we will see what is the composition of breast milk. So let's study. The nutritional link between the mother and child, it continues even after birth, and therefore the adequate nutrition during the lactation, it is of vital importance, as the infant is dependent upon mother's milk for few initial months of his life. So while breastfeeding, the mother needs extra nutrients to meet the baby's increasing needs in addition to her own requirements. And it is important to know that inadequate nutrition during the lactation, it affects quality and the quantity of milk. Let's try and understand the physiology of lactation first. With the onset of puberty and during the adolescence, among all the females, there is increased secretion of estrogenic hormones, which begin to prepare the breast for lactation purpose. And during pregnancy, further there is production of tremendous quantities of estrogen by the placenta, which brings about a rapid development of these glands in the breast. And large quantities of progesterone, which is another hormone, it changes the glandular cells of the breast into actual secreting cells. And by the time baby is born, the breast, they reach a degree of development which is capable of producing milk. So now let us understand first what is the structure of breast. Women's breast, they are made up of specialized tissue which produces milk. We call them glandular tissues, and along with that it also contains fatty tissues. So as we can see in this figure, these purple ones, they are the glandular tissues which are the milk producing tissues, and these yellow ones, they are the fatty tissues. These milk producing part of the breast which contains these glandular tissues, we call them lobes. It is divided into around 15 to 20 sections, and each lobe, they have certain smaller structures. We call them lobules. It is in the lobules where the milk is being produced. So from these lobules, the milk travels through a network of tiny tubes. We call them ducts. And these ducts, they connect and come together as larger ducts and they eventually exit the skin in the nipple. The dark area of the skin surrounding the nipple, it is called areola. We have just studied about the structure of female breast. Now let us see what is the role of various hormones in the milk production. So before the child is born, there are two hormones which play important role in this process. And these hormones are estrogen and progesterone. These hormones, they stimulate the breast development during the pregnancy. But along with that, they will inhibit the secretion of the lactating hormones by the pituitary gland. They will not allow these lactating hormones to produce milk, so that the only breast is growing and it is being prepared for the lactation process, but the milk is not produced before the child is born. Now, what happens once the child birth happens? So, with the sudden expulsion of placenta during the delivery, the source of placental hormones, it is removed. So, the secretion of these lactogenic hormones, it starts increasing. This brings about production and secretion of milk. Now let us see what is the process of milk production and secretion. This process of milk production and secretion, it can be studied in two distinct stages. The sucking of the infant, it starts and contributes for the milk production by the mother. The sucking of the infant, it stimulates the pituitary gland of our body and it produces two type of hormones. The first hormone is prolactin, which is produced by the anterior pituitary, and this stimulates the milk production in the alveolus of the breast. And the second hormone is oxytocin, which is produced by the posterior part of the pituitary. It has some different type of functions. The first function is it will facilitate the uterus to return to the normal size, because during the pregnancy the uterus has to expand. So when the mother is feeding the baby and oxytocin is released continuously, this will help the mother to regain her shape. And this also promotes the contraction of smooth muscles and the epithelial cell of the alveoli, so that the milk is released from the alveolus and the child is able to suck that milk. When the baby sucks the breast, nerve impulses, they are passed up the spinal cord to the interior pituitary. So this leads to secretion of prolactin hormone and it is carried via bloodstream to the alveoli in the breast, where it stimulates the milk production. Thus, the more baby sucks, more is the milk produced. This whole reflex is known as prolactin reflex, or we call it milk production reflex. When the baby sucks the breast, these nerve impulses, they are also passed to the posterior pituitary and it will produce the second hormone, oxytocin, as we have just seen in the previous diagram also. It contracts the muscle cells around the alveoli, which squeeze out milk and propel it down to the nipples in the baby's mouth. And oxytocin also makes uterus to contract and it controls the postpartum bleeding also. So the mother's emotions, the cry of the baby, or even his thoughts, they may initiate this reflex. We call it let down reflex or the milk ejection reflex. But at the same time, if mother is having some kind of anxiety or fear or tension, this may inhibit this reflex. So this whole process, it is governed by two reflexes, that is let down reflex and prolactin reflex. We have just studied about the physiology of lactation. Now let us see what are the various factors which affect this whole lactation process. Successful lactation, it is subjected to, influenced by a large number of factors which are related to mother and her environment. And while some of them, they directly affect the secretion of milk in the mother's body, whereas others, they may be certain circumstances or the situation that may either promote or prevent the mother from adequately nursing her child. So let us study about these factors. The first factor is the neuroendocrine factor. The sucking of the infant, as we know, and the continuous emptying of the breast, they provide the necessary neuroendocrine stimulation, which is important to maintain the physiological process of lactation. And it is also brought by the physical contact between the mother and the child. So that is why it is always recommended that mothers should breastfeed her child regularly. The second factor which influences this whole process is the nutritional factor. So the poor nutrition of the mother will definitely affect the quantity of the milk production. In some cases, even the quality may be affected. But it is done at the cost of mother's own body reserves. The nature will prefer the infant over mother. So that is why mother is said to lose if she doesn't eat adequately. So with the quantity of milk being less, the total amounts of nutrients which will be available to the child from a poorly nourished mother will be comparatively lower. So a well-balanced nutrition diet, is necessary for the mother for maintenance of her own reserves, preserving her own reserves, at the same time helping the child grow to his potential. The third important factor is the psychological factor. Now, the mother's willingness to nurse her baby, it goes a long way in ensuring that the lactation process is continuous and it is adequate. And we have also studied in the previous slides that the letdown reflex, it is directly associated with the psychological factors. And even the cry or the thought of the baby, it can lead to milk ejection due to certain emotions. On the other hand, if the mother is having fear, anxiety, worry, grief, or anger, it may retard the milk secretion. And along with that, another important factor is the social factor. So the effect of many social factors, we can say some modern times, they have also affected the lactation process, and its effect has been little bad, we would say. The traditional social values which were there in the rural area where the lactation was encouraged, but due to increasing urbanization and industrialization, and along with that, there are more and more women who are working outside the home. Lactation process has been affected. And many mothers, they feel that their breastfeeding may affect their figures adversely. And there is effect of certain advertisements and mass media which is related to availability of convenient infant formula, which has negative effect on the breastfeeding practices. And therefore, men as well as the other family members, they should create an environment that is conducive and that is favorable for the mother to feed her baby. Mother's milk is not only nutritionally adequate, but it is also easy to digest, particularly for the newborn. The milk secreted in first few days, it is, however, different in appearance and the composition from that of the milk secreted later on. So let us study about the composition of breast milk. soon after the delivery, small quantities of thick, yellowish, viscous liquid, it is known as colostrum, or the first milk, it is secreted by the mother. This should be given to the baby and it should not be discarded. Colostrum, it is rich in antibodies. We call them gamma globulins. It is rich in vitamin A and it is therefore not only providing nutrition to the child, but it will also help in developing the immunity of the baby. Thus, it will give him the ability to protect himself against the infection after the birth. It is also called the first immunization of the baby. After a few days of the lactation, the mother secretes larger amount of less viscous and whitish milk, which is known as mature milk, which is more or less a complete food nutritionally. This is the composition of breast milk. As we can see, for the 100 ml, it is going to provide 65 kilocalories of energy, around 1.1 gram of protein, 7.4 grams of carbohydrates, 3.4 grams of fat, and around 28 milligram of calcium with negligible iron, and vitamin A 49 to 50 micrograms in the form of retinol, and around 0.02 milligram of thiamine, 0.2 milligram of riboflavin, and 3 milligrams of vitamin C. Let's study about the timeline of milk production by the mother's body. So from the birth to first week, that is around 0 to 5 days, we call it phase 1 of milk secretion. It is the time when the colostrum is getting secreted by the mother's body. We have already studied about colostrum, that it is yellowish to cream in color and it has a thick appearance. It is high in proteins, especially antibodies, vitamins and minerals, and we have also studied that it is low in fat as compared to mature milk. This is followed by the second phase, that is known as a period of 2 weeks where transitional milk is getting produced by the body of the mother, and this transitional milk, it contains high level of fats, lactose as compared to colostrum, and it also contains water soluble vitamins, and all these things, they help the baby to regain any weight loss after the birth. Now this phase 2 is followed by the phase 3. This is the phase which is marked by the secretion of mature milk by the mother's body. Now this could start from anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks of the baby's age. This mature milk contains around 90% of water to maintain the hydration of the infant, and other 10% it contains carbohydrates, fats and proteins for the growth and energy needs of the infant. There are certain factors which affect the volume and composition of the milk. For example, fat and energy concentration of milk, they are significantly related to the maternal fat stores. These maternal fat stores or the reserves, they are formed when the mother is pregnant. And milk of mother, for the first time, it has higher fat concentration than that of mother having children before. There is no significant effect of supplementary feeding on the production of milk. And the frequency of milk removal, it is the important determinant of the volume of milk secreted, because the sucking, it stimulates the release of hormones, we have studied earlier also, and it stimulates the milk production. Therefore, putting the child to the breast and repeatedly and frequently emptying of breast will promote the milk volume, and frequent feeding, it will remove the locally active inhibitors also. And undernourished mothers, they produce less quantity of the milk, that means the volume will be affected, but same quality of the milk. That means the composition of milk will not be that much affected. Lactose, protein, calcium, iron, copper, and fluorine content of the milk, it is independent of mother's diet. Whereas selenium, iodine, and B vitamins, their content is dependent upon the mother's diet. So if the mother's diet is rich in selenium, iodine, and B vitamins, it will reflect in the milk. And lactation capacity, it can be genetic. So the amount of milk production and the composition, it could be determined by the genes of the mother. The physical activity and maternal and infant illness, it may also affect the amount and the content of the milk secreted. Milk production, it may also be affected by the inadequate fluid intake. So that is why the lactating women, they are suggested to include more fluids in their diet. Unusual flavor compounds, they may also be present in the breast milk if the mother consumes strong flavored foods. There are certain conditions when, despite the breastfeeding, the infant is unable to thrive. Now, the causes for this condition could be either because of some maternal causes or it could be because of infant causes. So, let us study what are these causes. The maternal causes could be either because she is unable to produce enough milk for the infant. Now, what could be the reasons that mother is unable to produce sufficient amount of milk? The first reason could be hyperthyroidism of the mother because of hormonal imbalance and illness of any kind of the mother, or if the mother is experiencing fatigue which is more than normal, or her diet is poor, or there is insufficient development of alveolar tissue of the breast. So there are not enough tissues to produce the required amount of milk. Next reason could be if there is a retained placental segment. We have already understood about the role of placental hormones, that is estrogen and progesterone, which were inhibiting the milk production. So if a segment of a placenta, it is retained in the body, or it could not be propelled outside the mother's body, it will be producing those hormones and this production of milk will be affected. And along with that, if the mother is taking antihistamine drugs, they also have an effect on the milk production. And another important factor is excessive caffeine intake by the mother. The second type of maternal causes could be poor letdown by the mother. So either the milk production is less or milk production is there, but it is not able to reach the baby. It is unable to cause the letdown. So it could be because of some drugs or hypertension of the mother or the stress or anxiety which will affect the letdown reflex. We have just discussed about the maternal causes. So after maternal causes which were either the milk is not sufficiently produced or it is not causing sufficient letdown reflex, and along with that there could be some reasons where the infant is unable to take the sufficient amount of milk. So what could be the reason? Either it could be poor intake. What causes poor intake? It could be either the child is of contented nature and he has a sleepy nature and he doesn't take sufficient amount of milk, and there could be some craniofacial abnormalities and child is not able to take milk because of that, or it could be because of the poor sucking position. It can also be reason. And if the mother is not feeding the child frequently, this could all these factors, they lead to poor intake of milk. Another cause, uh, another cause could be high energy requirement of the infant. So under what conditions infant needs more energy? Because of some congenital heart disease, or if he's small for his gestational age, or he is having some central nervous system defect. Under all these conditions, the infant needs higher calories than normal. Another cause could be low net intake by the infant. So this could be because of vomiting or diarrhea. That means the child, either he is not taking sufficient amount of milk, if he has taken that, but this vomiting and diarrhea, he is unable to digest that. And along with that, there could be malabsorption of certain nutrients or certain kind of infections. So they can all cause serious problems with the infant's growth. Now let's summarize what we have studied in this lecture. We have studied that adequate nutrition during lactation, it is vital for mother as well as child's health, as the infant is dependent upon the mother's milk for a few months of his initial life. Then we studied about the physiology of lactation, in which we studied that during pregnancy, the placental hormones, estrogen and progesterone, they stimulate the breast development during pregnancy, but they inhibit the secretion of lactating hormones by the pituitary gland. And with the sudden expulsion of placenta during the delivery, the source of placental hormone, it is removed, and secretion of lactogenic hormones, it is increased, and therefore the milk production starts. And after that, we studied about the prolactin reflex, that is also known as milk production reflex. This is the stage when the baby sucks the breast, nerve impulses, they are passed up to the spinal cord, to the anterior pituitary, leading to the secretion of prolactin hormone. And then we studied about the letdown reflex. It is caused by the oxytocin. This hormones, it contracts the muscle cells around the alveoli and squeezes out milk and propel it down to the nipples and in the baby's mouth. Then we studied about the factors affecting lactation. We studied about the neuroendocrine factors, nutritional factors, psychological factors, and social factors. And then we studied about the composition of breast milk, in which we studied about the timeline of production, that is when colostrum and then transitional milk and then mature milk along with their composition. Then we studied about the factors which affect the quantity and the quality of mother's milk. And lastly, we studied about different factors which cause failure to thrive while breastfeeding. Now, in this, we studied about the maternal causes, and which will cause either less production of the milk or poor letdown. And then we studied about certain infant causes, which were either poor intake or the high energy requirement of the infant, or poor net intake by the infant. So this lecture finishes, and we shall be continuing with the nutritional requirements and the nutrition care of the lactating woman in the next lectures. Thank you very much.